He told her he was stuck in a meeting. That was the word he used, stuck. The way you say it when you want someone to picture you trapped, helpless, apologetic. He said it in the calm, unhurried voice she had trusted for 11 years. The voice that handled difficult clients, that talked her through her mother's illness, that read bedtime stories in 3 different character voices until the kids fell asleep. He said it while standing on the other side of a glass wall in the lobby of the Meridian Hotel in downtown Toronto. His hand pressed to the small of another woman's back, guiding her toward the elevator with the easy confidence of a man who had done this many times before. His wife was watching from the mezzanine above. She had a glass of sparkling water in her hand. She was wearing the burgundy blazer she always wore to industry events, the one with the brass buttons that her assistant had once called Very You. She had arrived 40 minutes early, because she was always early, because punctuality was the first discipline she had ever mastered, and she had never stopped practicing it. She did not drop the glass. She did not make a sound. She watched her husband of 11 years press the elevator button with one knuckle, lean close to the woman beside him, and say something that made her laugh with her whole face. The woman was in her mid-30s, dark hair, a tailored green dress, the kind of composed, effortless presentation that takes significant effort to achieve. She was carrying a room key in her left hand. Her husband's name was Daniel Bonsu. He was a senior partner at a commercial real estate firm. He was, by any measurable standard, successful. He was also, as of this particular Wednesday evening in November, a man who had told his wife he was stuck in a client meeting that was running long and that she should go ahead to the industry gala without him, and he would try to make the dinner portion if things wrapped up. His wife's name was Philippa Harrow, and Philippa Harrow was not who anyone in that hotel, including her husband, believed her to be. Part 1. The name no one searched. Philippa grew up in a house where money was treated like weather. It was simply there, part of the climate, something you dressed appropriately for, and did not discuss at the dinner table. Her father, William Harrow, had built a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution company in Mississauga over 3 decades. Not flashy, not the kind of wealth that made it into magazines, the kind that accumulates quietly in registered accounts and commercial properties, and a portfolio managed by a small firm in Oakville that had handled the Harrow family assets since Philippa was 7 years old. When William died, Philippa was 31. She had been married to Daniel for 2 years. The inheritance was not public. There was no press release, no obituary that mentioned figures. There was a meeting in a lawyer's office in Burlington, a stack of documents she signed over 3 hours, and a number that her financial advisor, a careful woman named Rosalind, who wore the same style of reading glasses every time they met, confirmed twice before handing over the summary sheet. Philippa folded the sheet, put it in her coat pocket, drove to a coffee shop on Lakeshore, and sat for 45 minutes looking at the harbor. She did not tell Daniel the full scope. She told him there was a small inheritance. She said comfortable, and let him infer the rest. This was not deception, she told herself at the time. It was caution. She had watched what money did to relationships. She had watched her cousin's marriage dissolve the year he received an insurance settlement. She had watched her best friend's dynamic with her mother shift permanently, the first time the mother co-signed a loan. She understood, with a precision that had nothing to do with cynicism and everything to do with observation, that wealth changed the texture of every relationship it touched. She had been testing Daniel before the inheritance. She continued testing after. She went back to work 3 weeks after the funeral. She was the director of a small urban planning consultancy she had co-founded in her late 20s, a firm that worked primarily with municipal governments on affordable housing design. The firm was called Harrow and Kellerman. It was not a coincidence that her name came first. The inheritance sat in a separate account. The financial advisor sent quarterly statements that Philippa read on Sunday mornings while Daniel slept in. The number grew. The test continued. And Daniel, who thought his wife earned a director's salary and drove a 6-year-old Volvo because she preferred practical cars, never once connected the last name on the firm's letterhead to the Harrow family of Halton Hills. Part 2. The architecture of the ordinary. Their life together, from the outside, looked like a good one. Daniel was a reliable provider. He came home most nights by 7. He coached their daughter Piper's soccer team on Saturday mornings with a genuine enthusiasm that Philippa found, in the early years, disarming. He was funny at dinner parties. He had a memory for names and a handshake people remembered. What he did not have was an instinct for reciprocity. Philippa managed the household with the same systematic competence she brought to her professional work. She maintained the schedule for Piper, 9 years old and deeply attached to routine, and for their son Miles, 7, who had a mild processing difference and required an additional layer of coordination between school and the occupational therapist, and the pediatrician, whose wait list she had navigated for 14 months before securing the appointment. She handled the bookings, the renewals, the taxes, the conversations with the contractor when the basement developed a crack in the east wall. She kept a shared calendar that Daniel glanced at and a home binder that Daniel never opened. Daniel earned more, on paper. His salary was higher, his bonus was significant in good years, and he spent freely. On client dinners, on golf memberships, on a watch he had wanted since his 30s, and bought on a Tuesday in February without mentioning it. Philippa paid the insurance, the kids' activities, the cleaners, the groceries mostly. The property tax installments, the emergency fund that absorbed the furnace replacement 3 winters ago. She did not resent this, exactly. She tracked it, the way her father had taught her to track everything. Not for confrontation, out of instinct, out of the understanding embedded early. That documentation is not hostility. It is clarity. She brought up the imbalance once in the 5th year over a Sunday dinner when the children were at her mother's. She said, "I feel like I'm running things alone and it's starting to wear on me." She said it carefully, without accusation, in the same measured tone she used with clients. Daniel set down his fork. He said, "Philippa, you like being in control. Honestly, if I try to take over things, you redo them anyway." He said it without cruelty. He said it as though it were simply a fact about her, a minor personality quirk, filed and dismissed. She did not raise it again. She filed it instead, in the same internal record where she was filing everything else, and the file grew dense, and the woman maintaining it grew quieter. And the quiet was read as contentment when it was something else entirely. It was the patience of a person who has learned that some balances are settled slowly. Part 3. His mother's warmth. Adeze Bonsu was a woman who communicated love through food and disapproval through silence, and the silence in Philippa's direction was constant. She was not cruel in any documentable way. She was Ghanaian Canadian, impeccably dressed, deeply proud of her son, and quietly certain that the woman he had married was adequate in the way a rental car is adequate. Functional, but not what you would have chosen if you'd had more options. She expressed this through the particular art of the unfinished sentence. The children are so well cared for, considering. And then a pause just long enough for Philippa to fill in her own diminishment. She had 3 sisters, all of whom were present at every family gathering, all of whom participated in a family WhatsApp group that Philippa was added to 7 months after it was created, in a move that felt less like inclusion and more like paperwork. Daniel's younger brother, Kofi, was gentler, but he deferred to his mother in the way that comfortable sons do, which meant that in any room where Adeze's preferences were visible, Kofi disappeared. Philippa prepared for Adeze's visits with a discipline that bordered on military. The house was immaculate. The egusi soup she had taught herself to make, properly, not approximated, was ready by noon. She had learned the names of Adeze's church friends. She sent birthday cards. She translated the children's school updates into formats she knew Adeze would appreciate. Not once did Adeze say thank you. Not once did Daniel notice. She brought it up twice, in the first 4 years. Both times Daniel listened with the expression of a man waiting for the conversation to be over. Both times he said some version of, "She doesn't mean anything by it. That's just how she is." Both times, Philippa nodded, because she had already learned that some doors, once you see they won't open, you stop knocking and you build a different wall. Part 4. The Meridian. The gala was the annual fundraiser for an affordable housing coalition, one Philippa's firm had partnered with for 3 years running. She was on the planning committee. She had secured 2 of the corporate sponsors. Her name was in the program. This was not a casual appearance. This was her event as much as anyone's. Daniel knew this. He had known since October when she put it in the shared calendar. He had confirmed he would attend. He had confirmed again the previous Sunday. At 4:57 that Wednesday, she was in the car, dressed, 10 minutes from downtown when his text arrived. "Hey, client thing is running way over. So sorry. Go in without me. I'll try to make dinner. You'll be great." She read it at a red light. She set her phone on the passenger seat. She drove the rest of the way without music. The Meridian was a hotel she knew well. She had hosted a panel discussion in its second-floor conference room the previous spring. She knew the layout. She knew that the mezzanine overlooked the main lobby, and that the main lobby connected directly to the elevator bank that served the guest floors. She arrived early, as she always did. She collected her name tag. She accepted a glass of sparkling water. She stood at the mezzanine railing for a moment, looking down, gathering herself the way she always did before an event. A brief private reset. That was when she saw him, Daniel, in the navy suit she had picked up from the dry cleaner 2 days ago, hair freshly cut, collar open. Not the posture of a man running over in a meeting. The posture of a man who has nowhere to be but exactly where he is. He was not alone. Philippa stood at the railing with her sparkling water, and she watched. She watched him hold the elevator door. She watched the woman in the green dress step through it and turn back to say something. And she watched Daniel smile. Not his professional smile, not the one he deployed at dinner parties. The other one, the one she hadn't seen directed at her in longer than she wanted to count. The elevator closed. She stood there for 11 seconds. She counted them. Then she put her glass down on the railing ledge. She opened her phone. She did not take a photograph. She did not call him. She scrolled to a contact she had not used in over a year and pressed call. "Rosalind," she said when it picked up. "It's Philippa. I need to schedule a full portfolio review. Monday if you can manage it. And I need to talk about the discretionary account." A pause. Then, "Of course, Philippa. I'll have my assistant send a confirmation first thing tomorrow." Philippa put her phone in her blazer pocket. She took back her glass from the railing. She walked downstairs to the gala, found her table, greeted her colleagues, gave a composed and well-received thank you to the room on behalf of the planning committee, ate dinner, and drove herself home. She did not shake. She did not cry. Something settled in her chest with the weight and finality of a lock engaging. Part 5. The folder. Daniel came home at 11:40. She was in bed with a book. She heard him in the kitchen, the particular sounds of a man moving through a house he doesn't maintain. The wrong cupboard first, the pause, the correction. She said nothing that night. She had learned, somewhere in the last decade, that patience exercised strategically is not the same as weakness. Patience is the condition under which information is gathered. She was her father's daughter. Her father never confronted a business partner without documentation. He had told her this when she was 19, sitting in his office on a Tuesday afternoon when she should have been in class. Never walk into the room until you know more than they do. She built the folder over the following 2 weeks. It was not difficult. Daniel was not a careful man. He was a man who believed his wife was occupied with her own life, her work, the kids, the 1,000 tasks that kept the household running, and therefore not paying attention to him. He had mistaken her competence for distraction. There were restaurant charges on the joint credit card for places she had never been. On evenings he had said he was working late. There was a hotel reservation confirmation forwarded to his personal email, which synced to the family iPad that sat on the kitchen counter, which Philippa used sometimes to look up recipes. There was a jewelry receipt, a bracelet, $460, purchased on the Thursday before her birthday, on which she had received a card and a promise of a dinner they hadn't yet scheduled. She documented everything. She printed nothing yet. She assembled the digital file with the same calm she brought to a zoning variance application, methodical and without emotion, because emotion, she had learned, is most useful when it is chosen rather than when it happens to you. She called her lawyer on a Friday afternoon from her car outside the office. Not a family friend. A family law specialist in Hamilton she had researched independently. Someone with no connection to anyone Daniel knew. She made an appointment for the following Tuesday. Part 6. The conversation. She chose a Sunday. The children were at a day's ace for the weekend. A standing arrangement she had organized so that she and Daniel could have occasional uninterrupted time. The irony of this was not lost on her. She set her laptop on the kitchen table. She made tea. She sat down. Daniel came downstairs at 9:30 in the pajamas she had washed and folded the previous Thursday. He looked at her and at the laptop and at the stillness of the room, and something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or the instinct of a man who has been managing a secret and has developed antennae for exposure. "We need to talk," she said. He sat down. He poured himself coffee from the pot she had made. He waited. She did not raise her voice. She had not rehearsed this in the sense of performing it. She had thought it through, with the same structured approach she brought to a difficult planning meeting. She knew what she was going to say, and she knew what she was not going to say, and she knew the difference. She turned the laptop to face him. The hotel confirmation. The restaurant charges, highlighted. the jewelry receipt alongside a screenshot of the birthday card he had given her. A card, no gift, so that the dates were visible side by side. Daniel looked at the screen. He did not speak for a long time. "I was at the Meridian on Wednesday night," she said. "My name was in the program. You knew that. I watched you from the mezzanine." The silence after that sentence was the kind that restructures things. "Philippa." His voice was different now, not the confident voice. The other one, the one underneath. "I don't know what to say." "Then listen," she said, "because I do." She was not unkind. She was also not soft. She told him what she had seen. She told him what the documentation showed. She told him she had already spoken to a lawyer, and that she would not be discussing the specifics of that conversation with him, and that she was telling him now, because their children deserved to have parents who communicated directly with each other, rather than through intermediaries for as long as that was possible. "We can fix this," he said. "People go through things. I don't know what I've been doing. I can end it. I want to fix this." "I know you believe that," she said. "I don't think you understand what there is to fix." She closed the laptop. She picked up her tea. "You should know something about me, Daniel. Something I should have told you earlier, and I'll carry my part of that. But you also should have been curious enough to ask." He looked at her. "My firm isn't small. It never was. And the inheritance from my father wasn't what I let you assume it was." She paused. "I spent 11 years finding out whether you loved me for myself. I found out something different." She stood. She brought her mug to the sink. She rinsed it with her back to him for a moment. Then she walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs, and she sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet house and breathed slowly. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, the way she had learned when Piper was a newborn, and the nights were very long. Then she opened her laptop and sent 2 emails, one to Rosalind, one to her lawyer. Part 7. What he didn't know he was standing on. The divorce filing surprised Daniel in the way that things surprise people who have not been paying attention to accumulating evidence. He had believed, on some level, that the conversation in the kitchen was the beginning of a negotiation. It was not. It was a notification. His lawyer called hers. His lawyer called again. There were meetings Philippa attended in a wool coat, with a calm face, and said very little, and let Rosalind's documentation do the speaking. The first thing Daniel discovered was the firm. Not the boutique consultancy he had described to colleagues as Philippa's little planning company, but a firm that had been involved in 7 major municipal projects in the past 4 years, that had been profiled in a regional planning journal, that was being considered as a lead consultant for a transit corridor project, worth considerably more than his annual billings. His partners' wives, who moved in circles that overlapped with civic committees, had apparently known of Harrow and Kellerman for years. He had simply never connected the name. The second thing he discovered was the Harrow portfolio. Rosalind's office provided, through the appropriate legal channels, a summary of Philippa's independent assets. The number was presented without drama and received by Daniel's lawyer, with a stillness that he later described to Daniel as significant. Daniel called her that evening. She let it ring 4 times. "I didn't know," he said. "I had no idea about any of it." "I know you didn't," she said. "That's the point. You should have told me." "Should I have?" She stood at the window of the apartment she had moved into the previous week. A 2-bedroom in a building near the waterfront, purchased through the portfolio, outright, without a mortgage. Piper had already named her bedroom wall color. Miles had claimed the corner near the window for his Lego. You had 11 years to be curious about your own wife, about her family, her work, her finances, her history. You weren't. You were interested in the version of me that was useful to you, that ran the house and showed up at your firm's events and made your life legible. When I tried to tell you I was struggling, you told me I liked being in control. She paused. "You were not wrong, Daniel, I do. I just didn't know until now what exactly I was going to do with it." He was quiet for a moment. "My mother wants to reach out to you. Your mother spent 9 years making me feel like a guest in my own marriage. She doesn't want to reach out. She wants to renegotiate now that she knows the balance sheet." "Those are different things." "Philippa, I hope you'll be a good father through this," she said. "The kids need that from you. That's the conversation worth having." She ended the call. Part 8. The renovation. Harrow and Kellerman had been approached, the previous spring, about a major civic consultation project, a redesign of an underused industrial corridor in Hamilton into mixed-income housing and community space. It was the kind of project Philippa had spent her career working toward. It had been delayed by funding gaps and political hesitation for 2 years. In March, the funding was confirmed. The project was announced. The lead consultancy named was Harrow and Kellerman. Daniel's firm had a stake in a development parcel adjacent to the corridor. A commercial property they had been trying to reposition for 3 years. The corridor redesign would directly determine the value and viability of that parcel. Who led the consultation would determine the zoning framework. Philippa recused herself from any decisions that directly affected the adjacent parcel. She documented the recusal clearly and handed that portion of the file to her co-founder. This was not generosity. It was precision. She did not want anyone to misread her professionalism as sentiment, or her restraint as weakness. But the project proceeded under her firm's direction. The community consultation she ran was thorough and unglamorous. Meetings in church halls, surveys in 3 languages, hours spent listening to residents who had been overlooked in every previous planning process. The framework her team produced was detailed and defensible, and built on evidence. Daniel's firm's parcel, under the new zoning framework, was reclassified. Not blocked, not punished. Simply subject to the same community benefit requirements as every other site in the corridor. His partners could develop it, but they would need to incorporate a percentage of affordable units that had not been in their original financial model. She did not engineer this. She was not even in the room for that portion of the framework development, but she also did not protect them from it, because that was not her job. Her job was the community. It had always been the community. That was the thing Daniel had called Philippa's little planning company for 11 years, without fully understanding that. It was also, in a very concrete way, the foundation her identity had been built on. His partners were unhappy. Daniel called her once about it, carefully, having first asked his lawyer whether he could. She told him, calmly, that the framework was publicly available, and his firm's legal team could review it through the same channels as anyone else's. She wished him good luck. Part 9. The quiet of the new place. The waterfront apartment was not large. It was carefully chosen. Good light. A balcony with a view of the lake that changed color with the weather. Steel gray in November. Something closer to silver in January. A particular flat blue on the cold, clear days that Piper, who was developing a proprietary vocabulary for weather, called sharp days. Philippa had not bought art for herself in over a decade. She spent a Saturday afternoon at a gallery in the Distillery District, and came home with 2 pieces. One was a large format photograph of a prairie road that reminded her of driving to her grandmother's house as a child. One was an abstract print she couldn't have explained, but that made her feel, every time she looked at it, like something was exactly where it was supposed to be. She hung them herself. Miles built Lego at the kitchen table on the weekends he was with her. Piper had joined an art class that met on Tuesday afternoons. The dog, a rescue greyhound named Cobalt they had adopted 2 years prior, primarily because Miles had asked for 3 years. And Philippa had eventually relented, had adapted to apartment life with a serenity that Philippa found instructive. She joined the board of a housing advocacy organization she had worked with professionally for years. She hired a senior associate to handle the day-to-day at the firm so she could expand its strategic scope. She met with 2 universities about research partnerships. She gave a keynote in Ottawa in February that she wrote herself, without a communications team, the way she had always written her own material. The keynote was about the gap between policy intention and community experience in affordable housing design. It was not about her marriage. It was not about self-reinvention or personal transformation. It was about zoning variances and community consultation models, and the specific technical, unglamorous work of building places where people could actually afford to live. She received 2 standing ovations and 14 business cards. Part 10. The Last Accounting. On a Saturday in April, 14 months after the night at the Meridian Hotel, Philippa sat on her balcony with coffee, and the particular stillness of a morning when the children were with their father and the city hadn't fully woken yet. She opened the folder on her phone, not the documentation she had built during the marriage that had been transferred to her lawyer's file, served its purpose, and was no longer hers to carry. This was a different folder. Notes she had made to herself in the months after, small observations, things she was working out. She read through some of them. Then she closed the folder. She thought about something her father had said to her once, years ago, at the end of a difficult business situation she had watched him navigate. She had asked him whether he was angry. He had thought about it for a long time before answering. No, he had said. Anger is for when you don't know how the story ends. I know how it ends. She hadn't understood that when he said it. She understood it now. The balcony overlooked a strip of the lake. A ferry was crossing in the distance, small and steady against the water. The city was beginning to collect its Saturday sounds: cyclists, a dog somewhere, the low machinery of the weekend beginning. She had tested love against concealment for 11 years, and found that what grew in that condition was not love but assumption. The assumption that she would manage, that she would absorb, that the systems she built were properties of the household rather than expressions of a person, that the person running them was available, inexhaustible, and grateful for the opportunity. She had not been grateful. She had been precise. There is a difference. Daniel had not been a villain. He had been inattentive. He had been the kind of man who takes the temperature of a room and, finding it comfortable, never wonders why. He had benefited from 11 years of careful, invisible labor and had experienced that labor as the natural condition of his life rather than as a choice another person was making every day on his behalf. She did not know what he would do with the version of himself that remained when the scaffolding was removed. That was no longer her question to answer. Her question, the one she was actually qualified to answer, the one she had the training and the temperament and, it turned out, the resources to pursue, was a different one entirely. It was about what you build when you stop building, for people who have never looked up to notice the architecture. She had started answering it. She would continue. The ferry completed its crossing. The coffee went cold. A message arrived from Piper. A photograph of a painting she had made in the Tuesday class. An orange and yellow shape that might have been a tree or a fire or a person with their arms out. Philippa looked at it for a long moment. She wrote back, "I love this. Show me everything." Then she put the phone down and turned her face toward the lake, and she let the April morning be exactly what it was. Cool, unhurried, unmanaged by anyone, and entirely her own.